This week's episode is brought to you by Sin Bodhi's custom LJNs. Go to facebook.com/SinsLJNs. That's SINNSLJNS. And check out the amazing work that Sin Bodhi does with his custom action figures. If you would like a custom LJN style 8-inch figure of yourself or your favorite professional wrestler, just contact Sin Bodhi. Get your custom wrestling figure from an actual pro wrestler. Sin Bodhi has great designs, great prices, and he is really good looking. He told me to say that, and I agreed to it. Why? Because he is. Listen to the commercial halfway through this episode with one of my amazingly cute children, and they'll tell you more about why you should check out Sins LJNs at facebook.com/SINNSLJNS. Sin Bodhi's custom LJNs.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Is wrestling.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with me, your host, Cody Deaner. I am a professional wrestler with Impact Wrestling, as well as doing indies all over the world. I'm a professional wrestling producer with also Impact Wrestling. I love it so much. I'm also a professional traveling motivational speaker going into schools all across North America, sharing my story with them. I'm also a philanthropist, which is a fancy word for someone who likes to work in the community and give back to the community. I have something called Giver for Charity, and I've raised tens of thousands of dollars for children's charities all across Canada. You can go to codedeaner.com and learn more about how you might want to help give back to your community along with me. I'm also a professional dad. I'm a father of 4 amazing kids, all of which you have met in some form over the last number of weeks on this podcast. I'm also a professional husband, whatever that means. As a pro, my wife would say I'm a pro. I'm totally a professional husband. I think I'm a good husband. Maybe we have to ask her. Maybe I should bring her on and see what she thinks. But yes, I'm a proud husband. If I'm not a professional, I'm at least proud about it and proud to have a wonderful wife who's allowing me to give you this podcast right now for free, which means I'm not a professional podcaster because I'm not getting paid for this. However, I am making some money because of the wonderful supporters over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Thank you to the patrons over there, whether you are just a level 0 and you're just giving me a couple bucks for support, you're a level 1 Mark who's getting these shows early and ad free, or if you are a level 2 Smart Mark who's getting bonus content each and every week, bonus stories like an amazing bonus story from today's guest, Joe Hendry, who's dropping life advice. If you are a level 2 Smart Mark, you've already heard that bonus content, or maybe you are a Deaner Maniac Mega Mark, and I'm mailing you out merch every month, letting you be a guest on the show, which we are going to be hearing from shortly at some point down the line. Some of those Deaner Maniac Mega Marks over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Thank you for being a patron with me. Other ways you can support me are through prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner. Buy a t-shirt, get a cameo for me over at cameo.com/Cody Deaner. If you're a business, you want to advertise on this podcast, drop me an email at ads@codydeaner.com. That's ads@codydeaner.com. Go over to codydeaner.com/podcast, fill out the form, and let's talk shop. Let's talk business. Let's see how I can help promote your stuff, just like something you're going to be hearing on this podcast, Halfway Point. You heard me talk about it at the beginning. You're going to hear it halfway through, and you're going to hear one of my beautiful, amazing children help me steal not my stuff, but something of a friend of mine. But speaking of friends of mine, today, part 2 with my friend Joe Hendry. If you're somebody who is signed up as a patron over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner, you already heard this part of this conversation because you got this entire full conversation with Joe early and ad-free a couple weeks ago. But If you're not a patron, you're taking advantage of me giving this to you for free. I really hope that you enjoyed last week, part 1 with Joe Hendry. I know I enjoyed the conversation with Joe. If you got something out of that conversation, please take a screenshot of the episode, tag me at Cody Deaner, tag Joe at Joe Hendry, and let us know what you thought. And I will retweet it. I'll share it on whatever platform you're sharing it to. And I'd be happy to spread the love. If you're loving this podcast, because I'm loving doing it. Speaking of spreading the love, let me just share some of the love that I've gotten from you guys over on my YouTube at Cody Deaner Podcast on YouTube. This is from Karma Gugata 6445 in reference to a past episode with Rosemary. This is what was written. This was so good. To hear you guys talk about life and friends and mentors was really enlightening. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. Well, thank you, Karma Gugata 6445. I appreciate you dropping a comment on the YouTube and watching and listening each and every week to Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. With me, Cody Deaner. I got another one. This one's great. This is from a patron as well. This is a comment over on YouTube from Chris Maloney CWN, who is also a proud patron, one of my very first patrons, my first patron over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. So I very much appreciate your support, and I appreciate this feedback from the show. Just like your interview with Josh Alexander, it's again like two friends having an old school chat. The intensity of Josh in the ring, the intensity of yourself and your character in the ring, and the alter ego of Courtney being so believable as Rosemary. Your interviews make me invested even more in suspending my belief when it comes to Impact Wrestling. You're 3 episodes in. This was back when I was only 3 episodes in. And watching your interviews versus watching all 3 of you perform in Impact, it makes me appreciate pro wrestling talent for what they do even more. You're all great as performers, and this was a great interview with Rosemary. Thank you, Chris Maloney, CWN on YouTube, and my proud patron, Chris Maloney. Thank you for that comment. And thank you for saying that this makes you appreciate pro wrestling talent even more. That was one of my goals of this podcast, was to bring another side of my friends to the world and have them not just share about their careers and their time in the ring, but share the life lessons they've learned in trying to achieve their dream of being a professional wrestler. What have they learned about themselves? What have they learned about life on their journey? And I want to share those personal stories with you. I've got tons of feedback when I've been traveling around doing the indies and working the merch table. If you're one of those people that has come up to me and said, Cody, thank you for your podcast. You are doing a podcast like no one else. It's fresh. It's a different take on the wrestling podcast, and I'm getting a lot out of it each and every week. If that's you, one of the many people that have come up to me and said that, I just want to say thank you for listening. And thank you for taking a screenshot, sharing this with the world, and helping spread the word so I can help more people and get more people listening to this show. Let's get to part 2 with Joe Hendry. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back, listen to last week's episode. We left off with me asking Joe what made him decide he could get into this crazy world of professional wrestling, because so many people say they want to do it, they talk about doing it, and then they never do it. And Joe said, well, he had to lose everything in order to make this dream happen. What is he talking about? What does he mean? Well, let's get to the answer of that question and some more amazing life advice from Joe Hendry that he has learned through his travels and his journey in wrestling. Because as we know, and we are going to learn from Joe right now, wrestling is life is wrestling. Here's part 2 with Joe Hendry. a lot of us, yourself and me, we play with action figures. We get into the video games. We fall in love with professional wrestling. And then the majority of people that are like that never have the audacity to think that they can do it themselves and step into a wrestling ring and be a professional wrestler. What made you make that decision and leap in your brain to go, no, I'm going to actually try and do this thing?
Because I needed to not lose everything. Like I still had family and stuff like that, but I needed to lose what I perceived to be everything at the time. So, you know, I got when I was at university, I got a really good grade. So I had quite a tough course. So at the university I went to, in the program I was on, it usually takes 5 years to get a master's, but we did it in 4. So it was at Hendry University. And I remember I got a pretty good grade, and I got headhunted out of university, and I was offered a job in somewhere in the region of £50,000, which at the time but that's going to be, at the time, that was when the dollar was, you know, worth twice what the pound was. So straight out of uni, I could have been making, you know, $100,000. And I remember turning it down and going, nah, I'm going to do this music thing. And so I turned it down because in my heart, I believed that if I do this, I'm going to get caught up in the rat race. And the thing is, it was in London as well. So London, like, everything's 3 times expensive. So, you know, £50,000 in London is really like 30 in Edinburgh, Glasgow, whatever, right? But it was a lot of money for someone straight out of uni. And, you know, there's no guarantees, but at the time, I remember it was a couple months later, and my idea was, I'll just get a part-time job that's easy. I don't have to take home with me. I'll clock in and clock out, and then I'll do music when I'm not doing that. And I remember standing there I was ladling soup, just serving soup. That's all I was doing. I was standing there for, like, you know, £6 an hour or something like that. And I was thinking, man, I hope this works out. And it's weird. I've had several moments in my life where you could have gone, that was dumb. And I remember family members saying to me, why did you do that? Why did you do that? You had that opportunity. You could have done it. But I would have been a terrible employee. Do you know what I mean? Because my heart wasn't in it.
So are you someone then that has never chased security? That's why I think people don't understand that mentality, because I had almost an identical experience. I went and got my degree as well. I got a teaching degree, and I got offered a full-time teaching gig as soon as I was done. And I remember people at the time were begging for teaching jobs because there wasn't a lot, and I got offered one. And I remember specifically sitting down after getting this offer on the phone, and I asked her, I said, when do you need to know the answer on whether I want this job or not? And she couldn't believe I asked that. She goes, she just thought I was going to take the job. Yeah. And she's like, by the end of the day, I guess. I'm like, okay. And I hung up and I thought about it, and I just knew, similar to exactly what you just said, I'm going to get stuck in this rat race, and my real goals and dreams are going to get pushed to the wayside, and I'm going to fall into a very secure life, which is what most people are striving for.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get comfortable in that security, and then I'm not going to do the things that I really want to do. Is that similar to your mindset in terms of thinking about security and striving for what you really want?
It's weird. I look back, I have a very mixed view on who I was at that point in my life and in my mid-20s, because I look back sometimes and just think, you idiot, what it's like when you're in your 20s and you're not a kid in the world, and you look back on some of the things that you've said and done, and you're just like, what an idiot I was back then. But I think everybody in their 30s probably has those thoughts. But at the same time, there's something Dorian Yates said, actually. I don't know if you follow so he said, I've got a great deal of respect for who I was at that time. And I do in some ways as well, because the nuts to just go, nah, like, this is what's happening. To have that blind, like, faith and courage at that age. Like, I always had a plan. I always had a scheme. I was always putting on gigs. I was always selling products. I was always, I'm doing lots of sales and stuff like that. Like, I was always hustling and grinding, and just, I do have a great deal of respect for just having the balls to go, nope, this is what's up, this is what's happening, and we're going to find a way. Now that I'm in my 30s, we talked about the 3 qualities I mentioned earlier. I'm actually going to add a 4th, and I'm going to think about how to summarize this, but this is a piece of advice I gave we did that talk to kids in Australia when we were over with Impact. And one of the things I said is a lot of people go follow your dream and do exactly whatever you imagine your dream being, you go and you do that. I think there's a caveat that comes with that, and here's where it is. So I say yes, but I think that you should give consideration to what you are naturally drawn to and what you have a natural aptitude for. So, for example, if you are someone who has difficulty putting on muscle mass, but you are an incredible endurance athlete, and you're like, am I going to play, am I going to be a power lifter, or am I going to be a triathlete? Then maybe you might say, hey, if you're equally passionate about these things, you probably should steer into the one where you're yielding some results here. Like, I have a great belief that you should go where the wind is taking you. And so I think it's good to have an awareness of where you are, the hand you've been dealt, and apply that to your situation at the time, and realize that just because you want to do X, you don't need to be a straight path. If you're willing to go here and then maybe here and then here, no problem. Because let's be honest, right? I was in a band, and we got, I was a musician. We got many label meetings, but for whatever reason, just wasn't happening. Was not happening. And I remember, but the thing is, though, now, if I wanted to do it now and pivot from and leverage my wrestling, I probably could do something in music to the level that I would have been happy with, because I went like this, because I steered into, right, okay, well, I've already got my judo. I find it relatively easy to put on muscle mass as opposed to building, cardiovascular strength or whatever. And I looked at the attributes, and don't get me wrong, wrestling was my main passion, but my point is, I think if you have some consideration for the skill set that you've built and let that guide the path, it can be like a knife through butter compared to an uphill battle upstream.
Absolutely. Did you talked about kind of going where you're naturally going to fit and go towards. Did you follow that thinking to lead to your first big break in wrestling? Like, what were you just kind of, like, no, I got to head right there because I have this goal in mind, or were you going with the flow and then it led to your first big break, and what you consider your first big break, I guess?
I think I did have that in mind, because I had a rock bottom moment, and it was New Year's Eve going into 2013, where I had nothing going on job wise. I think I might have been completely out of work at that point, had, quite considerable debts at the time, no real prospects of any kind going on in any area of my life. And I thought, well, maybe now is time to do wrestling. And I really did, because I felt like I'd lost everything. I was able to just give it a go. And what was weird is I'd decided I'd never got a job related to my degree, but I decided that year, I was like, no, I will get a job related to my degree, but I will do it 3 days a week instead of 5, because, I need time to wrestle and da-da-da. And I told them straight up, I was like, hey, just to let you know, there's this training camp that's 2 weeks long, and I'm going to do it. And if you need to fire me, that's cool. Just having the balls to say that, because I'd already been at what was rock bottom, and you know what? What's the worst that's going to happen? I remember I got, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but like I've only ever had like unemployment benefits, and it was for 4 weeks, and I went on, and it was in between work when I started this, and they just didn't pay me, so I went, oh, to hell with this. So I didn't get any money. And then I started, and then so I thought I got to go and work. So I started working, got into wrestling, and the government sent me a check like months later for 4 weeks of unemployment benefit. so that was a weird one, but
it was a good kick in the butt, though.
It
made you go out and hustle.
I'm glad they paid me later. Later. It was great. But I did, because what happened, I made the decision, and because I'd hit rock bottom with music, I cared about it too much. Whereas I think with wrestling, even though this weird situation where I love wrestling more, but I get more joy from playing music, because I feel that with wrestling there's a lot of pressure that comes with it, and it's great once you've done it and you look back on it and you have those great moments, but as you know, there's so much politics and nonsense that comes along with the business. It can be exhausting, so you have this love-hate relationship with it. But because of that, I feel I was able to see it as a business, and I, as an outsider to the business, was able to see, well, look, actually these entrances are half the battle. It's half the battle. If someone has a great entrance, they've won half the battle. And I was like, I can make my own songs. The one thing I will say about myself is I am 100% confident in my songwriting skills. I can write songs like that. That comes to me naturally. And I was like, if I put my mind to it, I can write songs that will give me an advantage over everybody else. And that's what happened. So there's a company in the UK called ICW. Before I debuted, actually, it's a weird situation. I ended up getting a WWE tryout before my first proper singles match,
my gosh,
that was pretty nuts. But when I debuted in like a battle royal, and then I was in ICW the next night. I was in ICW the next night, which was the hottest indie in the world at the time, because I wrote these dumb songs that I was coming out to and made people laugh. So that, I think, yes, is the answer. I used the tools that I had to my advantage. And I think I do that now, and I need to be better at that. But I think now it's going like, sorry, I just keep talking. Jonathan Gresham really helped me with this. My whole thing, I just used to do like on the fly technical wrestling, which is weird because I really don't ever do it now. And Jonathan Gresham said to me, he was like, listen, you've got me, you've got Zack Sabre Jr. making appearances, you've got all these phenomenal technical wrestlers. Why would you compete with that when you're pound for pound one of the strongest guys we have? Why don't you do, instead of being technical strength, he's like, be strength first, then technical. And he's like, then you'll stand out. And I think that's a really good example of it. And so Gresham was very helpful there. So the answer is yes.
Was that in Ring of Honor that he gave?
That was in Ring of Honor.
Yeah,
that was just before the pandemic.
Okay, yeah, I think it's so important for anything in life, but very specifically in wrestling as well, is to find your lane. And I think a lot of guys can't do that. Maybe it's something psychologically, for the same reason we talked about earlier. People can't take advice because they can't take a step back and really objectively look at themselves and then make their decisions based on that. And I have found from talking with you today, but also previously, and one of the reasons why I wanted you to have on the show is you have this innate ability to do that. Take a step back, look at the big picture, and then make your decision from there and go, okay, what lane should I go in? Not just because I think a lot of businesses and people go, oh, I'm going to pick that lane because there's nobody in that lane. But the problem with that is they're not, like you said earlier, your advice to those kids is, even though that lane's open, you're not good at that lane.
Yeah.
So don't pick that lane. Yep. You know, you don't have a natural tendency towards that. So you've taken all of these things where your musical interests, your judo, your power that you have with powerlifting, and taking them all together and taking a step back and going, okay, what lane can I go into?
Yes.
And right now you have found this sweet spot of this lane that there's no one else doing it. You're a one of one right now. And that's not by accident. This isn't by accident. This is very strategic and thought out.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. And I think it's about really thinking strategically about that, but also applying when you get feedback from whether it be the audience or management, or watching it back yourself and, you know, making little tweaks along the way. But I think you're right, by being able to have that kind of bird's eye view of everything that's going on and going, maybe I'm going to take it in this direction. I think you can be quite strategic about that. I think there does come a point. Well, I will say this. So everybody that's in the company wants to be the world champion, right? Sure. I think that the next year is going to be interesting for me. I think I feel that I've earned my stripes with the Digital Media Championship and the run that I had, and I'm very happy with that. What I will say is I think I know what I have to do. I think you can reach almost a ceiling with all these things that you go, right, okay, so this is the lane that I've chosen. But if you want to get to the top and you want to have a turn as the talent, you have to actually take a step beyond that. And I think you have to address maybe the other lanes that you haven't paid as much attention to. So there are a lot of things that I like to think that I'm aware of what's working well for me and where we need to go next. And I feel I know what I need to do next. I think what I need to do is to borrow a page from Josh Alexander's book, actually, because what he does is he, to my knowledge, consumes basically all wrestling. Mm-hmm. And I think to be able to think about matches in the way that he does, or the way that Moose does, or the way that you do, or another veteran would do, you have to consume wrestling and immerse yourself in it more than I am right now, because I'm spending all this time doing music and I'm spending all this time doing bodybuilding. And there has to come a point where you go, right, all these things are great, but now to get to that next level, actually the wrestling itself and the match quality needs to be the focus. So that is what the journey I think is going to be for me for the next year.
Let me add something to that. And we're going to take a quick commercial break to tell you about an amazing product, an amazing friend of mine who has an amazing business. It's facebook.com/sinsljns. I don't want to tell you about these amazing products and my buddy by myself. I brought someone very special to help tell me how awesome these action figures are. Who am I talking to right now?
Hallie?
Yes, Hallie. Some of my listeners will be familiar listening to you last time we talked to each other. Now, how old are you, Hallie?
7.
You might actually be a little bit older than the last time people heard from you, because you've recently had a birthday, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
And you're a big girl now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and you have some really cool headphones that you're using right now. What color are your headphones?
Purple and pink.
Yes. Do you like purple and pink?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're going to like some of these things that I'm going to show you right now, because I'm going to show you some pictures of some of Sin Bodhi's custom LJNs, and I want you to tell me kind of what you think of them. Here's a really cool picture. Look at that. What do you think of that?
Cool.
It's cool?
Yeah.
Do you want to know something? My friend made that. Can you believe it? How did he make it? Well, if people go to Sin's custom LJNs on Facebook, then they can learn about how he does it. He makes that. He paints that. He molds that. And they're just like the action figures that Daddy had when he was young. You know those action figures I have in the garage that are in a big bin?
Yeah.
These are what these are just like those ones, except he makes them. What about this one?
I like that one.
You like that one? That's Superstar Billy Graham. Do you like his tie-dye t-shirt?
Yeah.
Yeah, he painted that tie-dye t-shirt. My friend Sin Bodhi. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
What about this one?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a word to describe that other than cool.
Awesome.
Ooh, awesome. Yes, all of Sin Bodhi's action figures are awesome. And check out this.
I like that one.
You like that one? So that guy on the left is Ozzy Osbourne. The guys in the middle are the British Bulldogs. And the guy on the right is Captain Lou Albano. My buddy made all of those. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yes. So you said they're cool, they're awesome, and that you love them. And I know if people get an action figure made too, they'll think that's cool. Now, listen to this. This is what my friend Sin Bodhi wants to tell his customers. If you would like a custom LJN style 8-inch figure of yourself or your favorite wrestler, please contact Sin Bodhi. Get your custom wrestling figure from an actual pro wrestler. He's a pro wrestler himself, and he makes these pro wrestling figures. Sin Bodhi has great designs, great prices, and he's really good looking. He told me to say that, but I said it because it's true. My buddy Sin's really good looking. He's really cool. Now, can you imagine getting an 8-inch action figure made of yourself?
That would be so cool.
If you got an 8-inch action figure made of yourself, what would you make it look like, do you think? You can make it look however you wanted. What would you do?
I don't know.
Would you have yourself flexing muscles?
Yes.
Oh, so you'd be flexing your muscles because you're really strong, aren't you? And you can do some pretty cool things, like you can do cartwheels, right? Would you make an action figure of yourself doing a cartwheel?
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
You were thinking of that? Wouldn't that be neat? You can have an action figure of you doing a cartwheel, and what outfit would you be wearing?
A skirt.
A
and
skirt?
A shirt that
Yeah.
said, "I'm strong."
Oh, a skirt and a shirt, and the shirt says "I'm strong." And would it be purple and pink, like your two favorite colors?
Yeah, my skirt would be pink, and also it would be purple. Half of it would be pink, and the other side would be purple, and then my whole shirt would be purple.
That sounds beautiful. Well, maybe we should get a custom action figure from Sin Bodhi of you doing a cartwheel, wearing all those things, because he could do it, because he's amazing. Do you think my listeners should be a customer of his and get their own action figure made?
Yeah.
What a cool birthday present that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, I got to keep this in my memory bank. And then next birthday, maybe we can get that made for you.
Yay!
Do you want to tell a joke or sing a song or do anything for our listeners before you go?
A joke.
You want to say a joke? Okay, you
Yes.
go right ahead. Give us a nice joke.
Why didn't the toilet paper want to cross the road?
Why didn't the toilet paper want to cross the road? I don't know why.
Because it didn't want to get stuck on the rolls.
It didn't want to get stuck on the rolls.
Yes.
Whoa, you get a nice little sound effect there, or whoa, you get some music for that being so cool. Oh man, that deserves some music and those sound effects, and well, maybe one of these too. Ah yes, there we go. Well, thank you for telling my listeners that crazy wild joke that I don't fully understand, but I think is really cool, and talking about cool, telling them about my friend Sin Bodhi and his custom LJNs. They should go to facebook.com/SinsLJNs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just give them that address again so they
It's
know.
going to be the coolest thing ever.
Oh, yeah. Tell them more about how cool it is. That's a really cool thing. The coolest thing ever. What else is it?
Awesome.
It's the coolest thing ever, and it's awesome. So they should go to, repeat after me, facebook.com
Facebook.com
/SinsLJNs.
SinsLJNs.
And so SinsLJNs is
SINNNS.
SINSLJNS. All right. Say bye.
Bye. Hope you have a good time playing with your action figure if you get one.
Oh, that's a great ending. Thank you, Hallie.
So that is what the journey I think is going to be for me for the next year.
Let me add something to that as someone who likes to give advice, and you've always been open to advice for me. When you take that journey, be very strategic also about who you're studying, because it goes back to what you said and about knowing what your natural quality is. I'm never going to study Rey Mysterio because I am not Rey Mysterio. I'm never going to be able to do what he does. Can I take some of the elements of his game and try to incorporate them? Yes. But as a whole, I'm not. So I will end up wasting a lot of time studying something that is not going to help my end game. So I've always, again, taken a step back, objectively looked at my talents and gone, okay, I'm going to have to study Roddy Piper, Terry Funk, and Jake the Snake Roberts because I can do some of the things that they do, I think, whereas these other guys, I can't. I'm never going to be Rob Van Dam. I'm never going to be Rey Mysterio. I'm not going to study that.
I will say, I think you've got the best DDT in the business right now. So you've been watching Jake the Snake.
Yes. depending on what you want to say, I say I borrowed it, and then others might say I just stealed it. But I also always add I do it in honor of him. I mean, he's the inventor of the DDT.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, right? It goes back to what you were discussing earlier, and that advice that you gave to those kids. You have to be very strategic about that. So as you take that next step in elevating your game, Joe, take the same mindset in the strategy of how you're going to apply that to
That's a really interesting way
to
to
your
look at it.
studying.
I feel like it's the same with acquiring knowledge. I talk about acquiring knowledge and learning the
Yes,
skill
it
of it like
is.
a tree, and that, you know, you start on one branch and then you go, oh, I'm going to go down here, and there's all these other branches, and it's like actually you're applying the same logic once you've gone deeper down the rabbit hole. It is. I think that's a really good point, because actually I've probably been consuming just all over the place wrestling, whereas actually what I probably should have been doing is going like, well, actually this is the path that I want to go down. And I think I feel it's starting to, and don't get me wrong, I'm not meaning to bury myself here. I think it's just like, look, if I was happy in the spot I'm in, and that's that, cool. But I'm not happy with that. I'm not satisfied with that. I want to achieve more. So it's not me saying that like I'm bad. It's just I want to be absolutely world class. So to be world class, and look, we all have to be students of the game. So I'm not meaning to bury myself by saying I need to do this or I need to do that. I'm very aware of where I'm at, what the expectations are if I want to go above that, and what needs to be done. You know, so here's the thing as well. This is something that's tough for people. I think when you learn a new skill, you learn lots of new skills quickly, and it's like it's all exciting and it's new. What becomes difficult is when you become expert at a skill to get to world class. We're now chasing these little marginal gains, which are a lot less. You don't get that same dopamine hit becoming 0.01% better as you did when you were getting 10% better every day, you know? And I think that is where most people go, I've had enough of this. That is where that's how, to me, that's how, you know, Michael Jordan's and how your Tom Brady's think and stuff like that. You have to be willing to chase those marginal gains. And if you're not, you have to make yourself passionate about it. Find a way to be passionate about it. I had to do that with bodybuilding. I'm a huge fan of bodybuilding now. Couldn't care less about it 5 years ago or whatever. But now I'm like, oh, love it. And you have to find a way to get yourself motivated and passionate about it.
I love that. I think that you're 100% right. But I'm going to question you on that.
Go for it.
Because I think this is a fascinating part of your story and your journey. You became a national champion in freestyle Greco-Roman wrestling. From my knowledge of the story, not because you found a way to have marginal gains, but you found a hack in the system and a way to win, and you exploited that, and you won and became a champion because you found the right hack.
Yeah. So basically what happened was, I was dating somebody.
This is fascinating, people. Like this, I love this. I love the story. I don't know it all, but I'm going to learn more. So I'm excited.
I'm going to have to deliver some bad news. I do have to pick someone up at the train station. So when we hit an hour, I am going to have to go. But all right, I am up for. I feel like we've scratched the surface. I'm up for doing a second episode at some point. If you want to pick it up or whatever at some point. But I was dating somebody at the time. She had tickets to the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony. So we went, and this was 2014, and I watched all the athletes go around the stadium, and everyone in the stadium was just so excited and so proud. And I thought, you know what, I want to do that. And then I was like, what sport would I do? And I thought about my days in judo, and I had this weird experience with judo where this is when I knew physically I had some sort of weird strength. But this is the first time I ever realized it because when I was a kid, I just got my ass kicked every day, every session, and when I went back to judo at 19 years of age, the people that had stayed and been there the whole time, they used to beat me up every single session. They'd won national they'd maybe won like Scottish championships and stuff like that. And I went back and I beat them all up. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I've been away. They've been here the whole time. And I just beat them all up. Right. So when that happened, the coach was like, right, he needs to be in the squad, which is the judo players that were going to the Olympics and stuff. So I'm back to getting my ass kicked every week, right? And I just didn't think I was that good at judo. But I didn't realize, because I was getting beat every week, sure, but I was getting beat by literal world champions and Olympic medalists. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, at the time, I just thought, oh, I guess I suck at judo again. But no, it's like you're literally in Scotland at one point had probably the strongest team in Europe. So, and I had the privilege of getting beat up by them every week. So that happened. I went into freestyle amateur wrestling because in judo they'd outlawed the double leg takedown, which was my best move. It was still legal in amateur wrestling, obviously. It's a big part of it. So that's why I decided to switch. So 26, I went along. First session, and I at the time was the equivalent of light heavyweight, and so they just put me on the mat with the heavyweight representative for the Commonwealth Games for Scotland. Beat him up, right? So he was the weight class above me, and I was like, okay, maybe we got something here. And I realized that the light heavyweight category, which was 97 kilos, was quite undersubscribed, and I was like, right, so who's good? And I went to some competitions, scoped it out, and I was like, there's 3 or 4 here that are just beyond in terms of level, but I've got 4 years until the next Commonwealth Games. If I can figure out how to beat these 4 individuals up, I can get enough rounds in with them that I can figure them out. And that's basically what happened. So I was willing to get my ass kicked for 3 years, and then something happened. I'll tell you what happened. The first time I've ever done this, and it's stupid I haven't done it. No, it's the second time. The first time I wrote down my goals, I went, I will be British champion in 2017. And I had no business being British champion. And I won it that year. When I got signed to Impact, that's the year I did it as well. So do you know what? Next year, we're writing the goals down because I've got 100% record on that. But yeah, so what had happened was I just kept going to all these competitions, and eventually the British Championship came up. I won that in freestyle wrestling, and I was going to the Commonwealth Games, and I was originally scheduled to compete against Robert Whittaker, who was UFC middleweight champion at the time. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. This is one of these moments in life where I was like, what's going to happen if the pro wrestler beats the middleweight champion of the world? And I'm one of these wild card fighters. I had like a really weird style because I didn't know the techniques. I had like 2 or 3 moves, but I just had this weird strength. And, you know, and just to be clear, just to be open, like I've never done steroids or growth hormone or anything like that. I have a weird strength, and I'm very fortunate that I haven't, you know, had to do that. But I just, for whatever reason, I'm good at fighting. I love a scrap. I love a scrap. Like, see, if concussions weren't a thing, I would be fighting honestly, if concussions weren't real, I would be pitching to management to go and let me do MMA fights on the side and all this. But unfortunately, concussions are real, and they're very, very serious. And it just ain't worth it, right? That's my viewpoint to do MMA fights, unless you love it. You want to be in the UFC.
So how did you win? How did you beat this UFC?
Okay, so no, I didn't beat Robert Whittaker. So
that's where I was wrong in the story. Okay,
I messaged Chael Sonnen, believe it or not. Do you know who Chael Sonnen is?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
So I messaged him and I says, Chael, look, here's the situation. I'm up against Robert Whittaker. 90% chance he's kicking my ass. What do I do? And he was like, you go on TV, you go on radio, and you call him out right now, and this is what you say. And he sent me the promo, right? So I do that, and no joke, I'm not saying it's because of this, but Robert Whittaker, so the UFC told Robert Whittaker, if you lose this match, you are going to get stripped. If you get injured, we're stripping you the belt straight off the bat. So he was like, I'm not taking that chance. So
that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Now, yeah. So, hey, I don't want to say the middleweight champion ran away from me, but I ended up with his teammate, and his teammate beat me anyway. So here we are. But you know, it happens, right? Yeah. But I remember I came back from the Commonwealth Games, and I remember losing and just being like, God damn it. It was tough, but I gave it my all. So I've won championships where I've been annoyed with my performance, whereas that one I didn't win the Commonwealth Games, obviously, but I was happy that I gave it everything, you know. And when I walked out, it was in Australia. I went like this, and the whole crowd booed, and I was like, I'm enjoying this reaction.
Yeah,
most people,
top heel.
Yeah, most people would have hated it. And my tactic was this: I had kind of made this deal with myself that I was going to do the Mike Tyson thing and stare at my opponents. And all the way up until the Commonwealth Games, I did that, where we'd step on the mat, and sometimes there would be 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and I would literally just stare at him like this the entire time.
Yeah.
And then you would notice one guy would go, he'd lock eyes with you, and then one time you go like that, and then he'd look back thinking you look away, but you're still there.
You beat him.
And he's going,
yep.
And he starts, and one guy was like, and this guy was way better than me, but he was like, just
you got him then,
freaking out by that.
You got them then.
What happens then is the person has an adrenaline dump, and they can't use their muscles to the way they usually could. I actually had this conversation with somebody backstage at Impact, which is, this is a little tip that's worked wonders for me. If you're out of shape, you're going to have an adrenaline dump in the ring. It's going to suck. So my viewpoint is, if you're not in the shape you're usually in, sprint backstage. So you'll sometimes see me sprinting backstage before I go out. And what I'm doing is I'm choosing to have my adrenaline dump on my own terms. So I get my second wind in the ring. So if I've put on a couple pounds or whatever and I feel like my cardio is not quite where it needs to be, I'll have that adrenaline dump backstage. So when I go out to the ring, it won't be a shock to me then. I'll catch my second wind. So, but yeah, my Commonwealth dream, I just wanted to go to the Commonwealth Games, and I did that. So I was happy with that. I came back and I wrestled. I thought I'll do one more championship. It was at a kind of rough point in my life, and I went for the freestyle championship again, and I got beat. I got the bronze for that, which was like not acceptable to me. And the guy that beat me, I was like, I'm way better than this guy. And then I did the Greco championship because I was so annoyed that I'd lost. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to do the Greco championship, which was, it was either the same day or the day after, but I was so mad. And it was the guy that beat me in the freestyle one. And I just thought, I'm just going to kick your ass. And I did. And I just wasted him in like 30 seconds. And I thought, man, it's so crazy how much of it is in your mind. Like, I had the tools to beat him, but this is something I'll say to people, and I say to people all the time. This is probably a good place to bring my story to a close for now. You have to give yourself permission to win. You have to give it can be you. Why not you? You have to give yourself permission to be the one.
Absolutely.
It's okay. If you've put in the work and you've earned it, it can be you. And I think that's the most difficult thing to get over, personally.
What a great summary and life lesson to stop on for wrestling is life is wrestling. Because that's not wrestling advice, even though a lot of wrestlers do need to hear that. If there's a young wrestler out there that's having problems with their confidence, why can't it be you? What a good lesson for wrestlers, but that's a life lesson. If there's something that you're striving towards, why can't it be you? But in your life, Joe, to summarize, and one of the main things I've learned is that nothing that you've achieved is by accident. You have thought it out, strategically put yourself in certain positions, found your lane for your life, but at the same time, picked those lanes because of your natural gifts that you have many of, that you've been building and growing since you were a child, getting into judo and music and acting and speaking, and you're applying all of those things to your career right now. So you say it was subconsciously, when we first started talking, like, oh, subconsciously I've got myself to where I am through these talents, but it's more than that. I think there's also some very specific strategies that you've implemented in your life to achieve the things that you've achieved. And I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of the life lessons that we've talked about here today. So thank you for that so much.
I appreciate that.
So thank you, Joe, for doing this. Thank you for being on the podcast. If people want to plug something right now before we go, do some kind of plug. I don't want to forget.
I'm going to plug this podcast. I'm a fan of this podcast. I very much like the concept. I'll tell you now, it's the first podcast I've done in a long time where I'm like, I want episode 2, damn it. I want back. That's not, seriously, that's a rare thing. Most podcasts that we do is like an obligation. It's, you got to, not an obligation, but it's business, whereas this, I'm like, I actively enjoyed this, and I would give up my time to do it anytime in future. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for being awesome. At Joe Hendry, I'll go find all your stuff and I'll plug it.
It's at Joe Hendry.
At Joe Hendry. At Joe Hendry. There it is. All right, thank you, Joe. Appreciate you, man. that does it for another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with me, Cody Deaner, and with my buddy and now yours, Joe Hendry. Isn't Joe awesome? Joe is so cool, so down to earth, so open. He's funny, he's charismatic, not just on the screen when you're watching him perform in the ring, but just when you sit down and I just get to chat with him. To me, listening to this part 2 just reminds me how awesome of a dude Joe Hendry is and how insightful he is. If you got something from the insightful comments from this conversation with Joe, please share this with the world. Let us know. Let me and Joe know what you got from today's conversation. Tag me at Cody Deaner and tag Joe at Joe Hendry and let us know what your favorite part of today's episode was and what knowledge Joe dropped on you today that you just need to share with the world, because there was a lot of what he said that has resonated with me and I've been thinking about a lot over the last number of days. It just sticks with me, so much of what Joe had to say. I just want to again thank Joe for being another guest of mine on this adventure that I've jumped into in the podcast world. There's so many wrestling podcasts out there. I realize this. It's one of the reasons why I didn't do this a number of years ago. I've been thinking about doing this for a number of years, and I convinced myself time and time again, every time I thought, you know what, I'm going to pull the trigger, I'm going to do it, I'm going to jump into the podcast world, I would convince myself why I shouldn't do it. And one of the reasons was, there's already a whole bunch of wrestling podcasts. The world doesn't need another one. And I just convinced myself not to do it. But the more and more I thought about it, I switched my mentality. I started to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And I was sharing all these stories with people almost daily, these life lessons that I have learned in my journey, both in my day-to-day life, but definitely in my life as a traveling motivational speaker, which I've been doing for almost a decade now. As I'm traveling around to schools, talking to young people, I'm dropping life advice on them, and all the life advice I'm giving to them is lessons that I've learned as a professional wrestler. And as I've talked to more of my friends, I've learned that I'm not the only one that's learning about life through my travels as a wrestler. All of the people that I'm coming across in the wrestling business, the insightful ones at least, are experiencing the same thing. So I'm going to be bringing those insightful people on over the next number of weeks, and you're going to hear more of how wrestling imitates life and life imitates wrestling. Next week, I am so pumped for the epic tale that is in store for you guys over the next couple of weeks with my next guest. This is somebody like almost the number one person I thought of that needs to be on a podcast that's about having a crazy life and learning about life through wrestling. This is the guy. Follow me on social media at Cody Deaner, and I'll let you know who that's going to be. And I'll let you know how you can listen to their full interview early and ad-free. I'll let you know how to do that right now, because as soon as I announce to the world who my next guest is on my socials, you're going to have access to the full interview on patreon.com/Cody Deaner. You can head there now. Tons of bonus content, not just stuff with this podcast too, guys. I'm filming stuff while I'm at Impact Wrestling and doing some behind the scenes stuff, talking about what it's like being backstage there, taking some video, taking some pictures, sharing that with the world over on my Patreon. Stuff that I'm not putting out to the world on social media. I'm only giving it exclusively to my patrons at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. If you're a business, you want to advertise on this podcast, like some of my friends have been doing over the last number of weeks, hit me up at ads@CodyDeaner.com, ads@CodyDeaner.com, or fill in the form at CodyDeaner.com/podcast, and let's do business together. If you want to book me on your wrestling show, and have me spread my love of wrestling to you and your fans, your promoter, you're listening to this. I know I got a lot of independent wrestlers listening to this. Thank you guys for the support. I'm hearing from you as I'm traveling around at shows. If you're a promoter, you're listening to this, you want me to come to your show, do a seminar. I also do seminars before events as well as shows. I love doing that. It's one of my favorite things to do. Drop me a line, book Cody at CodyDeaner.com. Book Cody at CodyDeaner.com, and I can come to a seminar, do your show, spread my love of professional wrestling with you guys. Head on over to my YouTube channel. Hopefully increase the subscription rate, review, and subscribe on there, as well as your platform. My YouTube is at Cody Deaner Podcast on YouTube. Buy a t-shirt, prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner. Buy a cameo, cameo.com/Cody Deaner. All the ways that you can support me. If you can't support me financially, take a screenshot of listening to this right now, share it with your friends and family, and let's spread the love. I'm going to end by giving some more love to today's guest, Joe Hendry. I was recently on an episode of Food Fight, which is a show that Joe does. Like, look, this guy's so talented. He's not just a musician. He's not just an amazing amateur wrestler and professional wrestler. He's also a very good interviewer and has a really great show called Food Fight, which you have to be a member on the Impact Plus app or the Impact YouTube Insiders. And you get full access to all of his episodes of Food Fight, where he sits down, has some yummy food, and just chats with his guest about life. I was a guest on a recent episode of Food Fight and really, really enjoyed my conversation with Joe on Food Fight. So go check that out. You could check out Joe each and every week on Access TV, along with me on Impact Wrestling in the United States or the Fight Network in Canada, as well as so many other channels worldwide, all around the world. Me and Joe are doing what we love as professional wrestlers. And as we do, we are learning a lot about life. Why? Because, as I've said from the beginning, we've learned this week and we're going to learn next week, wrestling is life, is wrestling. See you next week, guys. Bye-bye.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life, is wrestling.